July 1st, 2018. Delhi, India. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but the heat was already settling over the streets of Burari like a second skin. It was a Sunday, the kind of quiet morning when milkmen pass unnoticed and neighborhood dogs stretch lazily under parked scooters. Inside house number 137, all was still. Too still. At 7:15 a.m., a neighbor walked up the narrow lane, holding a bag of milk and his morning newspaper, expecting to find the Bashaw family, as always, opening their shop, arranging crates, sweeping the steps. But the gate was ajar, the door too. That was strange. They never left it open. Not in this neighborhood. Not in Delhi. He stepped inside, and what he saw would unravel the sanity of a nation. 10 members of the same family, hanging from iron mesh grills in the ceiling, their hands tied, eyes blindfolded, mouths gagged. One more, older, lay lifeless in another room. There was no blood, no forced entry, no sign of struggle, just silence. And in that silence, the first question rose like smoke. Why? It was just after 7:15 a.m. Wingurcharan Singh, the neighbor who delivered milk to house 137 each morning, noticed something was off. The front shutter of the Bashaw family's small grocery shop was still closed. That was unusual. They were early risers. He called out, lightly knocked on the gate, no response. Then he pushed gently. The metal gate creaked open. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the fans were spinning. The lights were still on. And then he saw it. 10 figures, hanging in a circle, from the ceiling grill of the hallway, blindfolded, mouths bound, hands tied behind their backs. They were all barefoot, all dressed in light cotton clothes, all eerily calm. He stumbled back into the street, screaming. Within minutes, the narrow road in Satnagar filled with people. Neighbors, vendors, passers-by. Some pushed through the door before the police could arrive. Others simply stood outside in stunned silence, whispering prayers or clenching their phones. Delhi police reached the house by 7:30. Inside, they found the same scene. Bodies hanging in near-perfect symmetry. One more body, the eldest, Narayan Devi, 77, found lying on the floor in another room, her limbs stiff, her face turned toward the door. No signs of forced entry. No evidence of robbery. Nothing stolen, nothing broken. Just an open ledger on the family's small wooden altar. And beside it, a spiral notebook, handwritten in neat, deliberate script. At first, officers suspected foul play, a home invasion, a planned murder, but there were no defensive wounds, no signs of a struggle, no weapons found. They noted the unusual positioning of the bodies. All 10 hanging victims had their feet barely touching stools or small benches. Each one had their face wrapped, eyes covered, hands tied, but with identical materials. The ropes had been measured, cut, and looped with precision. It was not chaos. It was order. The family was well known in the neighborhood. 3 generations, living under one roof for decades. Hardworking, respectful, regular. They ran a small grocery shop on the ground floor, a plywood store. They sold milk, grains, and household items. They attended temple, gave to charity. There had never been a single police complaint against them. 11 people, 7 women, 4 men. The youngest, a 15-year-old girl. The oldest, the matriarch. All dead. No note. No message. Nothing, except the notebooks. Detectives began examining the house. In the main room, a simple wooden temple stood against the wall. Photographs of deities adorned the shelves. On the floor below, incense sticks had burned down to ash. And in one corner, tucked beside a bag of wheat, another register, its pages filled with dates and entries stretching back years. Outside, The media began to swarm. Reporters shouted theories into microphones. Locals argued. Was it a ritual? A suicide pact? A murder staged to look like one? The police cordoned off the house. They photographed everything, marked evidence, collected fingerprints, fibers, dust samples. But what puzzled them most was the absence of panic. There was no sign of hesitation in how the family had prepared. Each knot had been tied by someone, or by the person themselves, with careful intent. The ropes were custom cut, arranged. Every blindfold, every binding matched. In the CCTV footage pulled from a nearby camera, something else appeared. At 10:38 p.m., just hours before their deaths, the younger family members were seen walking calmly in and out of the house. They carried stools, then ropes, then something wrapped in white cloth. No one looked scared, no one whispered, no one ran. They moved like people who believed they were preparing for something sacred, not something final. Inside, police discovered yet another notebook. This one opened to a fresh page dated June 30th, 2018. The entry read, "Everyone will follow the instructions with devotion. Do not panic. The time has come. The process will bring us to salvation." By 10 a.m., the bodies were carefully removed, one by one. White sheets covered each form. The street below remained packed. Neighbors crying, journalists filming, the city's breath caught in its throat. It would take days to identify the bodies formally, but the names were already known. The Batias, a family with no enemies, no debts, no signs of depression, and yet all gone. In this chapter, we dive into the immediate aftermath of the Burari deaths. India was horrified and captivated. The Chandawad family had lived in that house for over 2 decades. They owned a small grocery store, ran a plywood business, greeted neighbors warmly, attended weddings, gave sweets on Diwali. They were, by all appearances, entirely ordinary. So how did 11 seemingly happy, functional people ranging from a 15-year-old schoolgirl to a 77-year-old grandmother end up dead in their own home, hanging like puppets in a silent ritual? The questions multiplied faster than answers. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle, no suicide notes, at least not the kind people expected. No trace of poison in the kitchen. The groceries from the day before were still on the counter. Someone had bought milk just hours earlier. Dinner leftovers were still warm. Everything pointed toward planning. Everything pointed toward peace. And that terrified the public even more. Theories poured in like floodwaters. Some believed it was a mass suicide, carried out under the influence of a charismatic cult leader. Others whispered about black magic, tantric rituals, astrological alignments, and supernatural possession. One particularly persistent theory was that the family had been brainwashed, manipulated into believing that death was a gateway to salvation, that the hanging was not an ending, but a crossing. Still others thought this had to be a murder, organized, premeditated, perhaps even religiously motivated. Could someone have forced the family into this? Could it be revenge? In the chaos, journalists interviewed everyone they could find. Neighbors, shopkeepers, distant cousins. They were a spiritual family, one man insisted. They weren't suicidal. But the younger son, he had changed in the last few years. "I always found it odd," another neighbor said. The whole family would pray together, every night, at exactly the same time. Theories weren't just floating anymore. They were flying. The media did what the media always does in moments of mass confusion. It filled the silence with noise. Panel discussions aired in prime time. Experts in religion, psychology, and crime competed for airtime. Every anchor had a theory. Every theory had a hashtag. The scene had all the ingredients of viral tragedy: mystery, death, religious undertones, and a middle-class Indian family no one had ever noticed until now. Public fascination turned to obsession. The footage was replayed endlessly. Theories turned darker. Some even suggested the family had been part of a secret society. Others pointed to the number 11, which appeared repeatedly. 11 bodies, 11 pipes protruding from the wall, 11 diary entries, 11 rituals. People wanted an explanation. But the truth was still buried inside the house, inside the family's private life, inside something no one had seen coming. The police, under immense public pressure, began their official investigation. The case was transferred to the Delhi Crime Branch. The crime scene was sealed. The bodies were sent for post-mortem examination. And for the first time in days, the door to the Chandawat house closed. But the noise outside didn't stop. In fact, it grew louder. The questions remained. Who had written the diary entries found in the house? Who bought the ropes? Who orchestrated the arrangement of the bodies? Why were the bindings so specific? Why were the mouths gagged? Why were the eyes covered? Was this a spiritual offering? A collective delusion? Or something far more calculated? Even as autopsy results began to trickle in confirming hanging as the cause of death, the mystery deepened. Because now, investigators weren't just dealing with a crime. They were dealing with a phenomenon. And all of it, every theory, every headline, every whisper led to one chilling possibility. What if they weren't murdered and they weren't suicidal? What if they believed they were being saved? In this chapter, we leave the noise of the outside world and step into something far more disturbing, the quiet interior of a family's mind. As police begin to search the Burari home, they find no murder weapon, no suicide notes, but instead something far stranger. 11 handwritten notebooks, 11 years of messages, 11 paths to a chilling truth. What they contain will change everything. Each notebook followed a timeline. Each one described tasks, daily disciplines, breathing exercises, specific postures to be held at dawn or dusk. The tone was neither rambling nor fanatical. It was calm, almost serene. But what it described was not ordinary. The family was being led, shaped, molded by a system of belief that had taken root inside the house and grown slowly, year by year, without anyone outside noticing. The police kept turning pages, but what they were really uncovering was a descent, not into madness, but into obedience. At the center of this belief was a single recurring figure, not named directly at first, but always present. He was watching. He was guiding. He wanted silence, stillness, perfection. Eventually, the name emerged in fragments. Father, sometimes referred to with reverence, other times with a sense of divine authority. Father knows when the time is right. His return is close. He will take us across. The voice behind the pen believed these messages were not his own. He was simply a vessel. The handwriting belonged to Lalit Chandawat, the youngest adult son in the household. But the words, he claimed, were dictated by someone else. Someone no longer alive. Relatives later revealed that Lalit had changed after his father's death in 2007. Once quiet but pragmatic, he had begun practicing spiritual rituals, speaking less, writing more. He claimed he'd regained his voice through divine intervention, that he was receiving instructions from his father's spirit, and that these instructions had a purpose. What started as mourning had turned into method. Over the years, Lalit's visions took on structure. The notes became longer, more detailed. He introduced rules, commands, and slowly the family followed, not out of fear, but out of faith. One of the earliest notebooks speaks of cleansing the self through submission. Another details ritual fasting to purify thoughts. Later entries grow more specific, standing postures resembling a tree's roots, silence at specific hours, covering of the eyes to shut out worldly illusion. But the most disturbing parts came in the final weeks. Entries began to refer to the Banyan ritual. It was never explained fully, only hinted at as something that must be done to complete the journey. The wording became more urgent. The time is now. 11 souls, 11 roots, hang like branches. Eyes closed, mouths sealed, surrender your weight. He will catch you. The implications were clear. They were preparing for death, but they didn't see it as dying. They saw it as transformation. Investigators were stunned. What they had stumbled into wasn't a murder plot. It wasn't even traditional suicide. It was something much rarer, something that psychological experts struggle to define. Collective delusion. A closed system where belief loops in on itself, where no outside voices enter, and where every doubt is reabsorbed as a test of faith. In one entry, Lalit writes, "If fear comes, it is the ego resisting. Bind it, silence it, hang without fear, for he is near." There was no hesitation in the tone, no visible madness, just instruction, confidence, and devotion. Forensic teams confirmed the worst. The ropes used matched the exact specifications described in the diaries. The positions of the bodies were not chaotic. They had been rehearsed. Family members had performed mock hangings in the weeks before their deaths, all part of a larger spiritual exercise meant to simulate detachment from the physical body. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't desperate. It was practiced. Outside the house, the world speculated about cults, murders, mental illness. Inside, the journals revealed a truth no one wanted to accept. The family believed they were ascending. They believed they would survive. One entry read, "This is not death. This is the next doorway. Father has shown us the path. At the end of the ritual, we will not die. We will wake." They expected to come back. The final pages were the hardest to read. Lalit's hand never wavers. There's no panic, no regret, just a final instruction. Tonight, all must hang. Together, eyes closed. Do not speak. Do not open your mouths. Leave your hands bound. You will not feel pain. You will be lifted. It ends with one line. At that moment, detectives knew. They weren't investigating a crime anymore. They were standing inside a faith system built in silence, born from grief, sustained by obedience, and executed in absolute belief. And now, 11 years of writing revealed the unthinkable. This wasn't suicide. It was salvation. In their eyes, they weren't dying. They were finally obeying. This chapter explores the most disturbing truth uncovered in the Burari case. The final ritual was not improvised. It was precise, documented, practiced. The family didn't die in chaos. They died following a plan, a system, one that framed their own deaths not as tragedy, but as spiritual elevation. By the time investigators reached the final pages of the diaries, any illusion that the deaths might have been impulsive or chaotic had fully collapsed. What stared back at them from the inked paper wasn't confusion. It was structure. Among the writings, dated June 30th, just one day before the bodies were found, were entries that read more like the outline of a ceremony than the final thoughts of someone on the edge of death. There was no emotion in the tone, no panic, no poetry, only tasks. Instructions, the precision of someone planning a sacred event. The ritual was referred to repeatedly as bad tapasya, a term that translated roughly to deep penance or high discipline. But in the context of these notes, it meant something far more literal, an orchestrated process of self-purification carried out through physical suspension, complete surrender of the senses, and total silence. The words described it as a temporary state, a doorway, not death. According to the notes, the family was to gather in the hallway at a designated hour that night. Each member had been assigned a role, a placement, a position. The youngest were to stand in the center, surrounded by the others, forming what the journals describe as the roots and branches of a banyan tree. The symbolism of the tree had appeared throughout the entries for months. A spiritual form said to connect life and rebirth, death and salvation. Each person was instructed to prepare their own stool, to fasten their own rope, and to perform the steps in absolute silence. Cloth was to be wrapped tightly over the eyes as a means of blocking out illusion. Mouths were to be covered, not to prevent sound, but to hold in the spiritual energy. Hands were to be loosely tied, a symbolic gesture of surrender, not restraint. What horrified investigators most wasn't the strangeness of these instructions. It was the evidence that every single step had been followed, flawlessly. When the bodies were discovered, each one matched the exact details found in the entries. The positions were perfect, the ropes uniform, the bindings consistent. Nothing had been done in haste. Nothing had gone wrong. There were no signs of hesitation, no overturned stools, no broken bindings. Not one member had tried to escape. The medical examiner's reports confirmed this chilling fact. The family had died in complete silence. Not a scream, not a cry, no defensive injuries, no resistance. The ritual had unfolded exactly as written. From the outside, this seemed impossible. 11 people across 3 generations, willingly walking into death without a single moment of rebellion. But the diaries offered an explanation, one more terrifying than any weapon or external threat. The system of control had been built slowly, quietly, over more than a decade. L'Elite hadn't forced them into it through violence or domination. He had led them there through faith. Each small instruction, written over the years, had taught them obedience disguised as discipline. Each moment of silence had deepened the trust. Each ritual had made the next one easier to accept. The final night was the logical end of a process that had begun 11 years earlier. What made it so devastating was that none of them seemed to know it was an end at all. In the last notebook, the words are soft, almost reassuring. L'Elite had written that the banyan ritual would only last a short time, that he, the spirit of the father, would arrive during the process to awaken them, that they would not feel pain, that when it was over, they would return. There is no farewell, no hint of goodbye. The final entry ends not with closure, but with confidence. They believed they were crossing into something else, not leaving the world, but stepping momentarily outside of it. And perhaps that's the most haunting part. They weren't seeking death. They were waiting to be saved. The plan had been executed with the precision of a military operation. Every rope had been cut in advance, every piece of cloth prepared. The matching stools had been acquired discreetly. Even the arrangement of bodies had a spiritual logic behind it, as if the hallway itself had been transformed into a sacred space, a kind of altar. Neighbors reported that the family had been unusually calm that evening. Some had seen them buying groceries. Others had exchanged casual greetings. There were no signs of distress, no whispered cries for help. From the outside, it was just another night in Burari. From the inside, it was the fulfillment of years of instruction, the last page of a script that no one else had read. The question that haunted both police and the public remained. Why didn't anyone stop it? Why didn't one person, just one, walk away? But the answer lay in the system itself. This was not a cult with a charismatic leader demanding obedience. It was a closed-loop belief system, maintained from within, where doubt was not forbidden. It simply never entered. The control was complete, not through fear, not through force, but through a belief so deeply internalized that even death felt like part of the path. As the bodies hung motionless in the dim hallway light, investigators no longer saw victims of a crime in the traditional sense. They saw something far more difficult to understand. A family so tightly bound by love, faith, and discipline that they followed each other quietly and without question into the dark. The night before the discovery, the last hours of life captured not through testimony, but through silent surveillance. A single CCTV camera offers a chilling glimpse into the final preparations. No screams, no panic, just calm. What it shows is not fear, but routine. And what it misses is everything. It was a warm evening in Burari. Ordinary, quiet, the air thick with the weight of another humid summer night. At 9:14 p.m., a small figure appears on the black and white feed of a CCTV camera. It's one of the Bashaw sons, walking calmly through the neighborhood lane. He's not in a rush. He isn't looking around nervously. He's carrying a plastic bag. Inside the bag, cords, cloth, small household tools. A few minutes later, another member of the family joins him. Then another. In total, 5 members of the household appear on the camera that night, all walking in and out of the nearby market, carrying bags, nodding at neighbors, exchanging polite words. They're not hiding anything. And that is precisely what makes the footage so chilling. The recordings would later become central to the investigation. Frame by frame, the police reconstructed the final timeline. How the family moved, who purchased what, when they returned home. Nothing in their behavior triggered suspicion. No one ran. No one cried. No one hesitated. Inside the house, preparations continued. The CCTV didn't show that part, but based on the evidence collected, the ropes carefully cut, the stools placed, the journals marked, it was clear. Every detail was being finalized. In another time, on another night, these preparations might have looked like those for a religious festival or a community gathering. Something sacred, something shared. But here, it was preparation for silence. As the hour grew late, the neighborhood began to wind down. Shops closed. Lights dimmed. Dogs barked in the distance. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Yet inside the Chandawat home, every person knew what was coming. They ate together. They prayed together. Then, one by one, they began to ready themselves for the banyan ritual. They dressed in loose, modest clothing. They tied strips of cloth. They brought out stools from storage. They laid down a mat in the central hallway, the same hallway where 10 of their bodies would be found hours later. Not one neighbor reported hearing anything strange. No loud sounds, no furniture moving, no prayers even, just stillness. The last known movement on the CCTV occurs just before 10:30 p.m. A family member returns home. He closes the gate behind him. He walks slowly, like someone returning from a grocery errand. There's no alarm in his body, no sign of dread. This wasn't a family in crisis. It was a family in control. The most heart-wrenching detail of all came not from the footage, but from inside the house the next morning. Among the investigators' many findings was a single overlooked life. Locked inside one of the rooms was Tommy, the family's dog. He was alive, agitated, barking, eyes wild, the only living witness to what had taken place. He had been tied, isolated, deliberately kept away from the hallway. They had planned for everything, even him. But his presence was enough to remind investigators of one simple fact. This house wasn't abandoned when it became a grave. It was still full of choices, actions, decisions made in quiet conviction. And the camera outside, that single eye on the wall, watched it all unfold without knowing what it was witnessing. In most crimes, the night before is where things unravel. Tempers flare, people panic, secrets slip out. But in Burari, the night before was calm, tidy, disciplined, not a breakdown, not a moment of rage. It was the final step of a ritual that had taken years to complete. And so, as the city slept, 11 people prepared to leave, not with screams, not with goodbyes, but with the belief that morning would bring them back. In this chapter, the ritual is over, But the questions begin. The public, the press, and the professionals try to make sense of what happened in Burari. Was it suicide? Was it murder? Was it madness? Or was it something no label can fully contain? One by one, experts offer their interpretations, but none can offer certainty, only theories. In the days following the Burari deaths, the silence of the house gave way to a storm outside. News channels broadcasted the footage around the clock. Crowds formed at the gates. Social media erupted. India, stunned and grieving, was also deeply divided. How could 11 members of a seemingly functional family die together in one night, without force, without signs of conflict, without leaving a single farewell? Theories bloomed everywhere. Some called it mass suicide. Others insisted it was the work of a cult. A few suggested murder disguised as devotion. But behind the public noise, investigators turned to people trained to see beneath surfaces: psychiatrists, forensic psychologists, behavioral experts. And their insights were as unsettling as they were complex. What emerged first was the suggestion of shared psychosis, known in psychiatry as folie et plaisirs, a rare phenomenon in which a dominant individual suffers from delusions and gradually transmits those beliefs to others close to them, especially within isolated environments. In this case, all eyes turned toward Lalit. Experts reviewing the notebooks, the rituals, and the structure of family dynamics proposed that Lalit may have suffered from a form of delusional disorder. The content of his beliefs, speaking to his deceased father, receiving spiritual instructions, preparing the family for transformation, matched classic symptoms of secondary psychosis. But what shocked clinicians was the response of the rest of the family. They didn't reject his beliefs. They didn't confront him. Instead, they adopted the system fully, with calm and even joy. This led some psychiatrists to propose a phenomenon known as induced delusional disorder, where close relatives, often in a tight family unit, adopt the irrational convictions of one member, especially in the absence of external influences and under long-term emotional dependency. There was no cult leader, no threats, no abuse, only belief and trust. Meanwhile, the country watched in disbelief. Public opinion fractured. Some citizens mourned the family as victims of mental illness. Others blamed blind religious practice. Some suspected foul play, accusing unknown manipulators or organized spiritual groups. But no evidence supported those claims. There was no financial motive, no external pressure, no history of domestic conflict or abuse, no signs of struggle. The family's finances were stable, their relationships appeared healthy, and the police found no digital trace, no external messaging, no cult communications, no conspirators. Everything pointed inward. Eventually, after months of interviews, forensic analysis, and expert consultation, the Delhi police closed the case. The official conclusion read, "Mass suicide under shared delusional influence." It was the only label that fit, but even that wording left people unsatisfied, because deep down, most could not accept that a loving, close-knit family, educated, active, successful, could descend into such darkness without anyone noticing, without anyone intervening, without a single sign visible from the outside. The Burari case became a national mirror. It forced questions that had no easy answers about mental health. Psychiatrists warned that the case shouldn't be sensationalized or misrepresented. This wasn't about demons or possession or black magic, though the media was eager to use those headlines. The house at 50 Shakur Basti Road is now empty. Once filled with life, laughter, and the complex routines of an ordinary family, it has become a place no one dares to live in. The neighbors avoid it, the street feels quieter, and the shadows seem longer around that silent home. The tragedy that unfolded inside those walls has left a mark on the community, a scar that time has yet to heal. Even today, the lights in the house sometimes flicker on at night. Some say it's the electrical system. Others think it's something more, an echo of the family's presence, lingering in the darkness. Whether fact or folklore, it is a reminder that the story of the Burari deaths has not simply ended with their passing. Psychologists and mental health experts continue to study the Burari case closely. It has become a landmark example of what is known as shared psychosis, or folie à plusieurs, a rare psychological condition where delusions and false beliefs spread between closely connected individuals. The detailed notes, diaries, and ritual instructions found in the house offer a unique window into how the family's collective mind slowly spiraled into a dangerous delusional reality. What makes Burari so unsettling is how the tragedy defies simple explanations. It is not just a story of suicide or murder, but of a whole family deeply entangled in beliefs and rituals that cross the line into a terrifying psychosis. The head of the family, Lalit Pasha, appears to have been a key figure in this process, influencing the others with a mixture of strict rules, fear, and hope for spiritual protection. This tragic event has brought attention to an important, often overlooked topic: mental health in India. Despite progress, many people still face stigma and misunderstanding when it comes to psychological illness. Families often avoid seeking professional help because of shame or fear. Burari forced many to confront these uncomfortable truths and sparked a much-needed conversation about how mental health support can be improved, especially in close-knit communities. However, not everyone accepts the official conclusions. In India, some question the suicide theory, finding it hard to believe that an entire family could plan such a coordinated death. Alternative ideas circulate quietly. Some believe the family was cursed, others suggest foul play, and some think there may be more to the story than the reports reveal. These beliefs reflect the cultural and social complexities that surround the case and remind us how difficult it can be to understand tragedy from outside perspectives. For the experts, the Burari deaths remain a grim but valuable case study. It helps psychiatrists, sociologists, and anthropologists better understand how mental illness can affect not just individuals, but entire families or groups, how shared beliefs and fears can become dangerous when left unchecked. Lessons learned here could save lives if applied carefully and compassionately elsewhere. The house itself has become a symbol, empty and silent, but still heavy with memory. It stands as a reminder of the fragility of the human mind, the dangers of blind faith, and the consequences of isolation and untreated mental health problems. The story of Burari challenges us to reflect on how we care for our loved ones and how important it is to seek help when faced with psychological distress. Though many questions remain unanswered, the world continues to watch Burari closely. Its echoes remind us that sometimes the greatest battles happen not in courts or on streets, but quietly inside homes and hearts. The Burari family's story is a solemn warning about the line between belief and delusion, faith and fear, life and death. And as the house waits in silence, the lights flicker once more through the darkness, an eternal reminder of lives lost, mysteries unsolved, and a question that haunts us all. But what if they weren't trying to die? What if they truly believed they'd come back? If this story moved you or made you think, please take a moment to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you believe happened in Burari? Do you think mental health support is enough in communities like this? Your opinion matters, and I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to discover more stories like this, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you for watching.